Welcome to Between Two Psychs, a podcast where two psychologists and board-approved supervisors deep dive into many of the questions and challenges that provisional psychologists and early career therapists face in everyday practice, during training, throughout the internship, and beyond as they progress into working more independently. Your hosts, Isabelle Tombleson and Claire Trevitt, talk about a range of topics specifically relating to psychologists and therapists who are just starting out. Hello again and welcome back to another episode. Today I'm going to talk about therapist disclosure, what we can share, what we can't share, and the reasons why. So I think this is a topic that every therapist has to navigate at some point. And sometimes it can be quite a challenging one for us because we're encouraged to be real and we're encouraged to be authentic. But at the same time, we need to maintain a professional stance. And it's really important that we are working in the interests of our clients. And so this is not a general conversation that we are having in session with our clients. So it's not really a two-way conversation. It really is a conversation that moves in one direction to meeting the needs of our clients. And so this is a topic that many of us have to navigate at some point, and there are many differing views, I think, on the extent of self-disclosure and when it may be in the interests of our clients and what it is okay for us to share about ourselves and what we really should keep quite private. And this is also going to look quite different in supervision compared to in therapy. So I will be talking about that as well. So what is self-disclosure? So self-disclosure is anything that we reveal about ourselves and our experiences, our values, our personal details. This might be on purpose, intentionally, or it may be unintentionally. So we are going to give things away about ourselves that we may not necessarily even realize or that we may not mean to. So I was trained in the psychodynamic model of therapy. And in this model, disclosure is used with caution. And so really the focus is on the client's experience and not the therapist's. And I do believe that that is shared with most other models of therapy. And so we really need to be quite aware of any information of our own that we do share with the client, because we need to ensure that anything that we do share is in the client's own interest. So from my perspective, that also starts from outside the therapy room. So for example, on my website, I provide very little personal information about myself. I do provide professional information about my background, the types of therapies that I'm trained in, the types of presentations that I feel comfortable working with, those types of things, because I think that's really important for clients to be aware of. I don't share any information about my personal interests. I don't share information about my family. I don't post, even in my supervision website, I don't share information really about my personal life. I might occasionally share information about some interests that I have outside of therapy because that is really designed to encourage people to, I guess, have a life outside of work and to show how I might do that. But I'm very cautious about the information that I share. And I would never provide any information about family members or friendships unless it may be with another colleague or therapist on any of my social media. I know that many therapists like to share lived experience, and that can be very relevant for certain client groups, and certain populations really do welcome having a clinician with some lived experience. So for example, neurodivergence, working in the gender affirming space, And sometimes I also see in trauma services, people will talk about a lived experience of trauma. Often, though, there is an understanding that there is a lived experience, but very little detail is provided because, of course, the client is going to maybe benefit from knowing that there is lived experience, but they don't need to know the specifics around that. So again, that is in the client's interests. Sometimes personal stories can be part of why a person becomes a therapist. And when this is used very thoughtfully, it can sometimes feel quite powerful for clients, maybe who have not felt seen or who have felt pathologized. And so that there's a sense that they're going to see a clinician who is going to understand them. Again, this is in the interests of the clients, and the information that would be shared would ideally be very much around how this enables the clinician to provide the support and what they've learned along the way, and how they can provide a service to clients who may be presenting with something similar. So, when used intentionally, lived experience can create a sense of safety. Similarly, we could apply some of our lived experience in a session without giving too much away. Because of the therapy model that I've been trained in, I have seen people who understand what's involved in my training, and part of that is personal therapy. I might allude to that at times by saying something like, it's quite different for me in this chair than it is for you in that chair. And clients who have that understanding of the fact that I would be required to have therapy as part of my training might get that, but I'm not explicitly saying I've had therapy too. So sometimes we might allude to things that relate to our personal experience, but without explicitly saying so. So sometimes clients ask personal questions that may feel relevant to their needs. So, for example, they might say to a clinician who works with children, they may ask them if they had their own children. And that can feel quite challenging for some clinicians, particularly if they don't have a family of their own, because then, they worry about how the client might perceive that. So rather than actually answering the question directly with a client like that, I would probably go along a path of saying, it sounds like you're really wanting to know that your clinician, or you're wanting to know that I can help you. So it sounds like you're really needing support with this, and you're wanting somebody that really gets the challenges that you're experiencing. And my sense is that most parents, and I've worked with a number of people in supervision around this question, particularly when they've worked with children and not have families of their own, and it's usually worked quite well, because the shift moves on to what the client's really needing, because they want to feel supported and they want to feel understood. And part of the reason for asking that question in the first place was, are you going to get me? Are you going to be able to help me? And if we address the reason why they're asking the question rather than the answer, which brings the focus back to us, whether we do or whether we don't have children in that situation. Because if we do, they might then say, well, how old are they? And what are the things that you found most challenging? And the conversation has shifted to us. Whereas when we begin to address the very reason why they've asked the question in the first place, usually the answer becomes a lot less important. They don't really want to know about our own families. They want to know if we can help them. And so I would always encourage people who are asked quite difficult personal questions and are worried about that level of self-disclosure, is thinking about, okay, what is this client really asking me, and how can I address that, rather than explicitly asking the question. Sometimes there are things that we actually can't hide. So, for example, I'm originally from the UK, and I think over time my accent may have changed slightly. And many people might recognize that in me. And so I might get clients asking me whether I'm from the UK or whereabouts I'm from. And that's not something I'm trying to let them know, but it's just something that's there that I can't really hide. And so when it comes to those sorts of things, I tend to probably be a little bit more transparent, but it very quickly move the session and the content back to the client. Um, the same might go if you are working throughout a pregnancy. You know, clients may see you at various different stages of the pregnancy. They're going to know that you're about to become a parent. They are going to know that you're going to have some time off. They're also going to know that the focus of your attention is probably going to shift, well, is going to shift considerably away from work and onto the child carrying inside. And so that can be something that also you may not ordinarily tell clients about your family, but sometimes if you're, in that situation, they're going to see it. And if you come back from maternity leave and you're still seeing the clients, they may want to ask questions about the baby as well. And so sometimes clients will know things that we would rather ordinarily them not talk to us about or have as a focus of conversation, but they're there, and so they may come up. Yeah, and sometimes clients will just ask questions like, did you have a nice holiday? Are you married? And sometimes it is just polite chit chat. They're trying to get to know you a little bit better, or they're trying to sort of fill some of the time. Um, and so again, we want to really be thinking about bringing the focus back to them. I think one form of self-disclosure that's not usually sort of explicitly talked about is when we might talk about our own feelings towards a client, or our own reflections towards a client. That is us bringing a little bit about ourselves into the room sometimes, and it's about sharing our perspective on something. But again, it's very, very much in the client's own interest. And I'm a big fan of actually bringing my own feelings about a client and being quite transparent about that with my clients, because I do see this as a relationship, and one in which I want the client to feel sort of seen and heard. And so sometimes I will share observations and my feelings towards a client, things that I maybe appreciate about a client or admire about a client, if I think that that's going to be helpful and relevant. And it very much is in the client's interests. We may also be saying things that they're not used to hearing. And so sometimes that gives us an opportunity, because I work in this kind of quite a transparent, focused manner. It can give us an opportunity to explore the relationship that we have in the therapy room, and how my feelings towards the client might actually impact them, and even some of the things that I might be saying to them, and how that's landing for them. So that's not explicitly self-disclosure, but it is very much talking about how I feel. And I do think it's important to bring that into the mix, because I think that that can actually be really important and really helpful for our clients. I also want to talk about self-disclosure in supervision, because I feel that that can look a little bit different than in therapy, because the relationship is a little bit different. Our role is really around mentoring and modeling in supervision. So we're not necessarily just supporting emotional exploration, but we're trying to help therapists build confidence and skills and identity. And so I do often bring in some of my early experiences as a supervisee and in my training. So I might tell them about a time when I did a really terrible role play, and what I learned from that process, and also how daunting it is to record sessions and to watch yourself. That's something that I really struggled with, and I still find that quite daunting. It wasn't too long ago that I became accredited in EMDR, and part of that process was to record a session and do a role play. And it was quite excruciating to to play that back and just watch myself in action. But I really learned a lot from the process. I'm even doing this podcast and recording this and watching some of the recordings because I have to listen back when I'm editing some of the episodes, and sort of watching myself on screen has not necessarily been that easy, but it has been quite valuable because it's made me quite aware of certain things, and it's made me, I think, improve in certain areas. And of course, we always want to be learning. So sharing some of those experiences with my supervisees is really designed to support their learning, but also to support their confidence, because it's so easy to model something or make a suggestion based on 20 years of experience. Um, and in my supervision, I've had the same thing, and I think, gosh, why didn't I think of that? Or, gosh, I couldn't have said it in that way. And just realizing that you can't know what you don't know. And so it's that level of disclosure and giving away a little bit about my early experience, I think, is really important. And I would, um, I would do that quite readily. So a form of disclosure, I think, that is really important for clients, and what clients have a right to know about us, is around our qualifications, our therapeutic approach, any kind of financial arrangements that we might put into place around setting fees or cancellations, how we handle confidentiality. Now, these are all kind of very ethical um, aspects of the work that we do. And we do need to be very transparent in disclosing those elements of our practice to our clients, because it's really important that they are aware of these things. This also includes when you are a provisional psychologist working under supervision, ensuring that clients know that you are working under supervision, and that you're going to be required to record some sessions, and what's going to happen with the information, with the recording after the session. Normally it's destroyed, and what process that's going to take. Because I think it's really important for clients to be very aware. When we're working in this space, we take a lot of this for granted because it's second nature to us. But for many of our clients, it might be the first time that they're hearing some of this. So we want to make sure that there's a very, very clear understanding of the way that we work. And that is around setting a safe and informed um, therapy space, and therapy relationship. So, as you think about your own practice, I have a few questions that I would encourage you to ask yourself around self disclosure, and to reflect upon those either before, if you have the opportunity to plan, or maybe after you've made some disclosure, to reflect upon whether or not you felt that that was appropriate in the situation. So, firstly, asking yourself why you want to share something. Why does it feel important? And why does it feel important to share this in this particular moment and with this particular client? Is this for you, or is this for them? It always needs to be for the client. Consider whether there are unspoken things in the room. What else might you be disclosing without realizing it, or is there anything else going on between you and your client? I recognize that this is quite a transference focused question, but I do believe that this can occur regardless of the therapeutic model that you are using. Sometimes there are enactments occurring between our clients and ourselves, and being aware of those and reflecting on those can be really helpful. Also, ask yourself, can you hold the tension of not answering a personal question directly, but still staying relational. Is it okay to gently redirect to the purpose of the question? What is the client really asking? What is underneath that? And sometimes that does require us to pause a little bit, and to ask a question that we may not normally ask, in order to elicit that information. And finally, if you get it wrong, which, we do make mistakes. There are disclosures that I have made that I felt have not been always in the client's own interest, and I have reflected on that, and I try and refine that. We will all do that from time to time, or we sometimes get caught out, or something slips out. And if that happens, can you be willing to reflect, and can you be willing, if possible and if appropriate, to repair that with the client, to go back and say, this is what I noticed happening. I'm reflecting on what happened in our last session, and I just want to check in with you how that landed for you. Most clients will value that, whether or not there was any kind of rupture or not. Most clients will value the fact that you thought about them in between sessions. And so I do think that's a very relational way that we can work with our clients, that they will usually appreciate whether or not we've made a mistake, or whether or not they are aware or felt that we had made some kind of mistake or rupture. Because disclosure is not about getting it perfect. It is about being present and intentional, and client-centered. So sometimes it can feel a little bit grey, but I'm hoping that this has given you a little bit of clarity, and a few things to consider. And so thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time. Thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps others find the show. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Between Two Psychs for more updates and resources. For more information and to explore everything we offer, head over to our website, betweentwopsychs.com.au. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.